All right, folks, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And please be patient and bear with us because it is summertime and people are coming and going, and almost every day you need a new program. So bear with me, and I hope I don't miss anyone. If I do, I'll apologize now before we get going. Anyway, as required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a decision on these applications. And first thing I'll do is introduce the members of the Committee of Adjustment. We got Councillor Yeo, Ms. Richardson, Mr. Marsh, Ms. Robinson, Mr. Strangway, and I'm Mr. Robertson. Now this is where it gets complicated. Let's see, what have I got here? I've got the Manager of Planning, Ms. Berry, here. And we've got the Acting Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Walker, and our Acting Recording Secretary, Ms. Orr. All right, did I miss anyone? I don't think I did. All right, good stuff. So far, so good. All right, the agenda. I would like to amend the agenda and move under deferred applications 4.1.1 to the beginning of the agenda. Can I get a motion to do that? Mr. Strangway, Ms. Richardson, comments or questions with respect to the amendment to the agenda, or the agenda as amended? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? All right. And the minutes of our last meeting in July? Oh. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, you're right. Told you. It was one of those days. Yeah, all right. Yes, as a matter of fact, Mr. Walker here is the acting secretary, or will be, we hope, the acting secretary treasurer. So I need a motion, and actually there's a motion on the agenda there with respect to that Ian Walker, planning officer, large developments with the city of Kawartha Lakes, be appointed as acting secretary treasurer for the city of Kawartha Lakes Committee of Adjustment meeting of August the 18th, 2022. Can I get Mr. Marsh, seconded by Councillor Yeo. Comments or questions? All those in favor? And congratulations to you, Mr. Walker. All right. All righty. Now we're back to the minutes. Are there any comments or questions with respect to the minutes? And thank you, Ms. Richardson, for that. Much appreciated. Are there any comments or questions with respect to the minutes? Then I need a mover. Mr. Strangway, seconded by Ms. Robinson. All right, no further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right. For the benefit of everyone that's listening or here, the committee will hear comments, gather information, and may ask questions to clarify statements made. The committee may ask and answer questions or redirect questions to the appropriate person. Please note that any information or comments given to the committee during this meeting, they're considered evidence. We will first hear from staff, then the applicant or his or her agent. We will then hear from any person in support of or from those who have questions, concerns, or are opposed to the application. Finally, the applicant or his or her agent will have an opportunity to respond to any of the statements made to the committee. And I would advise or ask that if you wish to speak to the committee, when you come up on the screen, please give us your name. And I would advise that we do afford you 10 minutes to give us your presentation. No one has ever gone that far. In fact, they're usually much shorter than that, but we do afford you 10 minutes. If you find that you just have to have more time, then I will ask the committee if they would afford you a couple of more minutes. I don't think that's ever happened before, but just so folks know that that's the situation with us. Okay. All right, and we're now dealing with file number D20-2021-029, and this is vacant land, assumed road allowance, geographic township of Somerville. Now, there's been some discussion with respect to a deferral, so Mr. Marsh, would you like to, before I put a motion on the floor, Because if I put a motion on the floor, the only thing debatable is the time frame of when to bring it back. So I'd like just some general discussion with respect to that. Mr. Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd request that this be deferred on the basis of, we just got the report yesterday and we got an additional report just over an hour ago. And I realize the applicant's been waiting a long time, but I personally would like time to review the report and the history. This goes back 2 years. And I'd like an opportunity to be able to review the reports properly and drag it. I don't want to drag it through a great long debate. And quite honestly, I'm not really prepared because I just received some of the information. So I'm just asking if we could defer it for a month, and that would give us time to have all the reports in front of us.
Ms. Berry, you have discussed this with the applicant. Could you speak to that, please?
Mr. Chair, thanks for the opportunity. I have, and just if you'll indulge a moment, the report that we prepared and circulated quite rightly, as the member had mentioned yesterday, was simply based on the fact that it is a deferred matter. It isn't a new application coming forward, and as such wasn't published according to typical convention a week ahead. That said, it's a complex matter. It has a long history, and our staff report does a couple of things. Not only does it conclude with a recommendation for the committee's consideration, but it does take the reader, and of course the decision makers here, through a chronology of events that have transpired as they relate to the minor variance that may not yet have been presented in a cohesive manner, in a comprehensive manner to the committee members. So we have provided that, including committee motions and council motions pertinent to the matter. Also, the main reason for the previous deferrals was the development of a new management directive. The committee gave staff the opportunity to see that process through, to review any feedback as a result of the presentation of the new management directive to council at their last council meeting, was July 19th. So that has taken place. There has been some follow-up discussion amongst staff across the corporation in pertinent departments, realty services, public works, in the roads division. So the report also includes a summary of the new management directive. And finally, it goes through the rationale for reaching the conclusion that our position has taken and sort of how we landed there. Now, supplementing the report are a series of appendices. The last Appendix F includes the staff report prepared by the city solicitor that was taken to council, and the appendices related to it, including the new management directive that council has endorsed, the SOP related to implementing that management directive, and finally, bylaw related to fees. So that's new information we thought was relevant for the committee to review, have at their fingertips. What we didn't provide was a piece of former policy, and given our recommendation is tied to a pre-existing council policy that was developed in 2017, it certainly seemed reasonable, if not critical, to ensure that the committee members had access, if they hadn't prior, for other reasons, had access to review that council policy 2017-010 for their reference and to help in their decision making when considering the recommendation that staff have put forward with respect to the variance. Okay, so that is just a little bit of background. Hearing the reasons for the deferral, I certainly would support the reasons behind it. This was a lot of information to digest in the last 24 hours. We can appreciate that. Perhaps, to me, most importantly, the applicant will have an additional month, as well as the committee members, to review this 2017 council policy, which impacts steps going forward. So I think it's a reasonable position to take, and I did have a brief opportunity to connect with the applicant to ensure that he was aware of the council policy and the next steps. So with those comments, Mr. Chair, we would support a deferral should that be the position the committee takes.
Thank you. And when you spoke with the applicant, how recently had they been made aware of the policy? Because I know the policy is of 2017, I believe, but there was an amendment later on regarding that. So is this something that the applicant is just receiving as well?
Mr. Chair, the applicant, although I can't speak to whether he was familiar with the policy prior to the 2021 update, which the policy identifies, we have only just provided him with the policy today in the same fashion as with the committee members. So I would expect today going forward, this might be the first opportunity he has had to see the updated version of the policy. And Mr. Chair, if you're not aware, I understand that he is participating via Zoom in the event there was some occasion you had or the members had a question, if that was appropriate to ask him.
Any comments from committee members? All right. Mr. Harjula, are you, I'm told you're online with us? How are you, sir?
Hello, good. How are you?
I'm very well. You heard what the manager of planning had to say, and the fact that you've as well apparently just recently received this new policy. And it's being contemplated that we defer this until next month, until everyone's had a chance, because the committee has just received it as well. Where are you with that?
Yeah, I agree. I received the report this morning. I was aware of the earlier version. It was actually what another planner had shown us about a year ago. So originally those were the terms that we were originally applying for the minor variance under, but before the new rules started to come through. But yes, I did receive the new updated notes this morning.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your comments and appreciate you taking the time. Very well. So, all right, that being said, Mr. Marsh, then you initiated this. Are you prepared to make the deferral motion?
I will, Mr. Chair. I move that the, whatever it is, what number it is deferred.
Now, the only issue debatable is the time frame, so I'm hearing 1 month, so I'm assuming it's the September meeting of the Committee of Adjustment?
I believe that would be enough time for everyone to review the documents, yes.
Do I have a seconder for the deferral? Mr. Strangway? All right. I think okay, so the motion is to defer till the, whatever the date is in September, is it 22nd? All right, very good. All right, you know the motion on the floor. All those in favor? And that's carried. And thank you, Mr. Harjula. All right, thank you, committee. I appreciate that. All right, moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2022-046, and this is 66 Shadow Lake Road, 28, Geographic Township of Somerville. Ms. Berry.
Mr. Chair, thank you for that intro. We have our first minor variance on the screen in front of us showing us the location. Address as noted, 66 Shadow Lake Road. The purpose of the application would be to recognize a constructed carport. The carport has been built. We will see a few photos of it in just a moment. The relief that is needed to allow the carport to remain where it is would be in two instances, two sections of the bylaw to be addressed. One, to permit the carport in the front yard. The bylaw only recognizes side and rear yards as permitted locations. And secondly, the distance from the front property line. The bylaw would require structures to be 7.5 meters from the front property line. The carport is cited at 4.6 meters. That gives us an idea of the layout of the lot. The lot is, although relatively wide, shallow In terms of the buildable, developable area, there is quite a significant slope, steep drop-off behind the house towards the river. And in fact, when I attended the site, the owner was down at the dock and breathlessly greeted me after running up that slope. That is an excellent form of exercise. To do that a few times, really a year. I think he probably does it a few times a day. Okay, so moving along, this gives us an idea of the actual structures and placement of all of the buildings and structures on the site. Most importantly, the topic of the day is what is outlined in red. That is the location of the new carport. Okay, so some photos to give us an idea of what the site looks like on the ground. For those who can't see the laser pointer joining us online, I'm pointing to the center of the picture on the right, and that shows the river. Don't really have a great idea, again, of the significant steep slope there, but the drop-off happens, and now I'm at the left photo, right sort of behind the deck platform behind the house. The proponent had supplied these photos on the screen as part of the application submission, demonstrating the 4.6 meters between the front property line and the location of the new carport. Of course, the carport being occupied by 2 vehicles. These photos now have been taken by yours truly, and we get a sense of the carport's location in proximity to the traveled portion of the road. The cars that are parked, the blue car and the white truck on the right, on the left, are still, we can see, in front of the carport and not in the traveled portion of the road. The camper trailer, the pop-up, sort of in the deeper part of the first photo on the left, that is also contained on property that is used by the owners, not within the traveled portion of the road. This is not an uncommon configuration in the neighborhood, having traveled through and evaluated the sites in proximity. There are numerous examples of properties that have built structures similar in their front yards, again, because of the challenges with the lot and the inability to build like structures elsewhere. To give you an idea of all sides of the carport and the in the owner's opinion, the overbuilt nature of the carport, safety first, and that is it for photos. We've evaluated the application as though the carport was not yet constructed. Of course, we have the ability to see what it looks like on the ground, which isn't the case. Let's take a moment and just speak to why this carport was constructed without getting relief first. There were, according to the owners, a series of sort of unfortunate circumstances about 2 years ago, ahead of the pandemic, that prevented the completion of the building permit application that has been filed, and so that is being reviewed by staff. Currently, our plans examiner has provided comments on the file that a building permit will be needed. And on top of that, of course, because construction was commenced without a building permit, the fees will be increased in accordance with the fees bylaw, but no other comments as far as the structure itself. There were staff in our building department who did visit the site ahead of the building permit application being filed to sort of understand the complexities and the challenges with the site and citing it where it eventually did get cited. Though the construction did take place prior to the issuance of the permit, I would support its location if it were allowed tomorrow to be cited in this place, given the reasons outlined in the report. It's both intended use and what it can be used for going forward, and its compliance with the official plan policies for the waterfront designation, the zone, and overall its anticipated negligible impact on the function of the municipal right-of-way. That's the key here, is the function of the road. Excuse me, it is a private road. It is unmaintained, private road. That notwithstanding, we want to ensure that there aren't unnecessary encumbrances in a road that is traveled by numerous people who own property on adjacent to this right-of-way. So although no impact on municipal functions, we also think it is set well enough back from the traveled portion of the road not to cause a negative impact. Mr. Chair, I will leave it there.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. And thank you as well for the explanation on the permit there, because I know I had a question there, and perhaps committee may have had or may have. So thank you again for that. Are there any questions of the planner? Ms. Richardson?
Through you, should there be a condition included that the one shed needs to be removed? I know it's noted on Schedule C, but should it be one of the conditions as well?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, we did evaluate the zoning bylaw for the permitted number of accessory structures. We weren't in a situation here where we were going above the permitted number. We don't have to include that condition. We would not be in a non-compliant situation if it were to remain. It's the interest of the owners to remove it. So my suggestion would be that it's unnecessary.
Further questions of the manager? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Committee. Councillor.
As printed.
Okay, moved by Councillor Yeo as printed. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Marsh, to second that. Further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving right along, we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-047. This is 37 Ken Hill Beach Road, Geographic Township of Burlum. And again, Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so we'll just go right ahead to an aerial image of the site at the address 37 Ken Hill Beach Road. The purpose is to construct an unenclosed deck. That is the purpose of the application. It's noted a number of times throughout the report, but has been brought to our attention as recently as just before the meeting, but also from the owner, the applicant, and from staff reviewing the report, that on one occasion we do reference an enclosed deck. So let me point that typo out in the report and remind the committee and our viewing public that we are speaking to an unenclosed porch. That is how we evaluated it and what was applied for. All right, so two areas of relief that have been applied for. One, the minimum water setback is required at 15 meters. Proposed setback for the deck is 9.91 meters, and a further encroachment as a result of the stairs to 7.01 meters. That is number one. Number two requires the interior side yard setback, 1.8 meters. The deck would result in a reduced setback of 0.94 meters, and we'll see a couple of photos in a minute that are evidence of this. The existing setback is in fact at 0.94, so the deck would be an extension of what is already encroaching into the side yard and going no further than the 0.94 meters into the side yard. So again, outlined in red, we see the area of the proposed new deck, unenclosed, as well as the area that the stairs would be built. We'll see in a further drawing that the stairs to be constructed would, or are anticipated to connect with an existing set of stairs that help the person enjoying the property, again, traverse a fairly steep slope in the rear yard. Okay, so here's an elevation identifying the rear of the home, the proposed deck, as well as, and I'm just going to use the laser pointer to point to the central area. The words say existing stone patio, which is proposed to remain in place, to give us an indication of the extent of the patio and the proposed deck extending slightly into the water setback beyond that, and then again with the stairs. And at the very lowest point of the elevation is the connection, or the proposed connection for the proposed stairs to the existing. All right, aerial view, site plan from above, bird's eye view, as they say. And we'll move along to seeing on the left to the right, the entry into the home, front of the house. In the center, the rear yard standing on the dock to get an image or an idea of what the backyard looks like. And then to the extreme right, the existing patio, as well as the rear wall of the existing home. Now, to give us an idea of the side yard reduction, already we have, some significant vegetation, a cedar hedge along the shared property line. On the reduced side yard, we can see that that is quite densely screened. Although passable, no issue with using the opposite side yard, which is larger than the minimum interior side yard requirement, and that's the photo that we see on the right. Plenty of room to pass between the yards. All right, Mr. Chair, we evaluated the application, of course, against the 4 tests and conclude that it does satisfy the 4 tests. Our recommendation is that the application be approved. It is relatively a small lot, modest-sized home. The deck certainly doesn't result in an overbuilt result on the property, but does give the opportunity to the homeowner to add additional amenity space and be able to use the indoor-outdoor space in a higher and better use of the property, which is ultimately what the zoning and official plan policies are there to help the owners achieve. No concerns by the Conservation Authority. Of course, this is relevant when we're dealing with an encroachment into the water setback. There wasn't a need for formal comments to be submitted as a result of the circulation of the application. We've included that in the staff report for your information. All the natural hazard and heritage considerations were captured in a previous process, which the owners undertook with the KRCA to have a regulations permit issued. We have, therefore, no concerns with the impact of the deck on any of the natural heritage or hazard features. And with that, there were no further comments received from the public, from any of the agencies, noting any concerns. So, Mr. Chair, we recommend approval of this one.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Are there questions of the planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Anyone there, Joel? Nope. Hello, sir. Your name is?
Hi, I'm Michael Conlon.
All right, go ahead, sir.
I've not, nothing to say. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions of the deputant? All righty. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Committee. Mr. Strangway.
As printed.
All right, do I have a seconder? Ms. Richardson. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right. And we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-048, and this is 626 Indian Point Road, Geographic Township of Bexley. Ms. Berry, you're a busy lady. Go ahead.
All right, so yes, indeed, we are in Bexley, Mr. Chair, at 626 Indian Point Road, and we're looking at an aerial image to give us an idea of how the buildings and structures and other features, recreational opportunities, I note the tennis court in the front of the property, how the lot is laid out. It's a double lot, and again, this gives us, without the benefit of the vegetation, et cetera, that we see in the aerial, we see here all the buildings and structures on the property. I will just bring your attention to the red circle at the top of the image, and it just is identifying from a distance the area of the proposal. And let's get to that without further ado. The purpose of the application would be to permit an addition to an existing boathouse. So we see in the corner of the property a boathouse. It is on land, and the idea is to, as we advance to the next slide, add square footage to the water side of the existing boathouse. So we'll see there, of course, Balsam Lake to the left, the size of the addition outlined in red, and the rest of the boathouse. Mainly this is precipitated by the purchase of a larger boat, and a larger boat requires larger storage. That is, at the end of the day, the reason for the improvement. Some elevations prepared by the designer, and some images of what's on site today. The reason for the photo on the left, is to indicate the space between the shoreline. It's the bright area to the extreme right of the right photo. That's where the water is. The boathouse itself, and then the rear of the boathouse. Not a whole lot of opportunity for an addition to be built. We see the slope in the lands, the grade change behind the boathouse, and this is the area of the tile field. The septic system, which is quite extensive, is located there. So focusing on the addition at the front or water side of the boathouse. This is an image on the left of, excuse me, I was referring to right in the previous photos. I am catching myself doing that now. On the left, we're seeing the front of the boathouse. I'm standing at the shoreline. We can also just about make out, excuse me, the neighbor's adjacent boathouse, and I'm pointing to the left portion of the left photo. So there is a tree line that separates the two properties, but side-by-side boathouses here that we can see. Now from behind the boathouse, still staying on the applicant's property, this gives us an idea of the cedar rail fence line, the trees, and the amount of space in between the adjacent or neighboring boathouses. The relief that is being sought, since we're looking at this photo, I'll remind the committee in two ways. Number one, to permit the side yard setback to remain at its encroached state, 0.8 meters. The bylaw would require that it be at 1.2. We can just, based on the age and number of years that the boathouse has been in place, has achieved a compatibility with its neighboring boathouse to the side. The second relief that's sought is, Member Richardson, we're pointing it out on this one, permit a maximum of 4 accessory structures as opposed to the bylaws cap at 3. Now, I just will add, it's actually recognizing that these structures are already there. We're not adding a new accessory structure to the property, so we're recognizing that we're adding on to an existing 4th structure, and pertinent to recognize that in the decision, should the committee decide to approve this application. I'll just take a moment, Mr. Chair, and in brief, note Kawartha Conservation's comments. Location of the proposed development, based on, of course, the existing structure being already in a cleared portion of a woodland. No EIS is going to be required because of that fact. However, we do have to take these precautions when reviewing properties in areas such as this for potential negative impacts with respect to any of the natural heritage or hazard features. Balsam Lake, of course, fish habitat, significant woodland, the flooding, erosion hazards may be present. And lastly, we're within the boundary of the Balsam and Cameron Lake Management Plan. So with the exception of two matters, one, that a permit is going to be required from KRCA, and that's noted in the report. I'll also add that after preparing the report, we did have the following comments come in from our commenting partners at the city. Number one, from our supervisor of Part 8 sewage, that we include a condition addressing a review for the septic system. That's there just in connection to where the location of the addition is. And Mr. Chair, I've prepared some language to capture this condition for the committee's consideration. And secondly, from our plans examiner in the building division, that although spatial, meaning distance separation, could potentially be an issue, it is certainly something that can be addressed at the building permit stage and does not need a separate condition for it to be addressed. So if I may, ask that the committee consider, in addition to the two conditions that are outlined on the staff report, that we include a third condition, that approval under the Ontario Building Code pertaining to waste disposal be obtained within a period of 24 months after the date of the notice, failing which the application shall be deemed to be refused. The condition will be considered fulfilled upon completion of a septic review with required fees that we understand have been submitted. So we do just want to capture the completion of the septic review, and those are the last of my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. So if I heard you correctly, then, for the benefit of the committee, question with respect to the permit will be pursued under the building permit process? A permit with the Kawartha Conservation?
That's right. The Kawartha permit would be pursued as a result of the building permit process, and the applicant is aware of that.
Questions of the planner, Mr. Strangway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Berry, perhaps you can help me out. I'm looking at the slide that's currently up there, the left slide, and I'm wondering what the current use of the boathouse is now. It almost looks like it's more of a residential use. I don't see anywhere that, there's accessibility for boats from the lake, that type of thing. I wonder if you could clarify that.
Mr. Chair, through you, certainly. To the member, it was explained to me while I was on the site and met with the owners that what we see as the green finish on the wall of the boathouse on the left was at one point access for boats to come in and out. So that did function in that capacity. It is used for storage. To my knowledge, it is not used for a residential purpose, meaning habitable purpose, if that's what the member was implying by use of the word residence. That, as far as we're aware and understand, that is used for storage and will, if approved, continue to be used for storage, but of a larger boat.
Further questions?
Yeah, just to that, so I'm just trying to see on the diagram, how long is the addition that they're proposing, that section in red, how long is that? It looks like it's fairly minor.
The square footage through to the member is 13 square meters. I would agree with you. It is quite small. It is less than a third of the size of the existing boathouse, which is about, 26 square meters. For the specific dimensions, I am quite prepared to just take a look at the non-photocopied prints and get an exact dimension on length and width, if I can just take a couple minutes to do that.
Mr. Strangway?
Yeah, I appreciate Ms. Berry's comments. Perhaps when we have the applicant speak to it, I'm just trying to understand the extension when it based on the current appearance, just exactly what the owner's trying to achieve here. Thanks.
So you want to hold that thought then, and we'll see if they're there?
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, thank you. Any further questions of the planner? Yeah, Ms. Robinson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have similar questions to Mr. Stangway. I'm not seeing a boathouse door for a boat access. And in addition, if the boat is bigger, I'm not like, it doesn't look like the door, on the elevation, they do have like a boathouse door, but I don't see that as being high enough to be able to get a marine railway and a larger boat into it. So I just have a question of clarification to Miss Barry. If you go back to the plan that shows the expansion, can you just put that up on the screen? Right. So is the red part the existing and the proposal at the back? Or is it the existing is the part at the back and the red at the front is the proposal?
Mr. Chair, through you, the proposal to add square footage is on the water side. It is in
Okay.
red.
Okay. And by the way, I'm struggling to hear you, Miss Barry. Is there any way you can be closer to the microphone when you speak? I've got my speakers turned up as loud as they can be. Anyway, I'll wait to ask questions of the applicant when they come on the line, but I hope they're hearing what our questions are and address them.
Did
Thank
you,
you.
did you wish a response from Ms. Barry, Ms. Robinson?
No, well, I think I'm going to wait till the applicant, she responded about the clarification on the addition. And I'm going to wait to ask the applicant
All right, thank you.
questions. Thank you.
Any further questions of the planner?
Mr. Chair, excuse me. I hadn't addressed Member Strangway's question, and if I may proceed with that before we move forward.
Absolutely, go
All
ahead.
right, thank you. So the plans indicate dimensions of the door, the access to the water, as well as the overall dimensions. So I'll start with dimensions of the door at 10 feet and overall width, 13 feet 6 inches, and overall depth, 8 feet. Now, bigger is my choice of words when I refer to the boat. Longer might be more appropriate in terms of needing the additional square footage. And certainly I'll turn things to the applicant to address further if needed. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's why I didn't ask you for the response, because I believe Mr. Strangby had indicated you would ask the applicant. So, anything further, the committee to the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Yes, I'm here.
And your name, sir?
It's Joe McCool.
Right, thank you very much. Do you wish to speak to the application, sir?
Sure, I can clear up any of the questions that I've been hearing from Ms. Robinson and Mr. Strangway. This has been a boathouse. The owners took possession of this place 8 or 9 years ago. So the way you see it is the way it was when they bought. So it was a boathouse at some point, and I guess somebody decided to close that opening off. There is a pump in there that pumps to the house. It's the water system at the back of this. So the building is storage and a bit of mechanical in the very back. It's 20 feet existing deep. We originally were planning to go 5 feet out the back, 3 feet towards the water. But because of the location of the raised bed for the septic, Ann's been out to the site and done her septic review, because I know that was a question. That's all been through, and we can't go back, so we had to go forward. So we're increasing by 8 feet. That's it. There's no increase in the height or the width. It's strictly out front, and it's to accommodate a longer boat. The owner's not, he's been putting it in storage for the last number of years and he would like to have it more available.
All right, thank you. Mr. Strangway.
Yeah, Joel, thanks ever so much for that. I appreciate that. So do I understand the plan is to take out that part that's filled in where the door was, so it makes it a full boathouse? Is that the idea?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, we're coming towards, we're coming out the front, one direction, that's it, so.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes, and so is it going to be a marine railway that comes up
Yes,
to bring the boat up?
yeah,
Is
it's low
there enough-
profile, it's low
Oh.
profile, so the door is it's 7.5 feet high. So there's plenty of room for that.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, are there any further questions of the applicant? All right, thank you very much for that, sir. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application, in support of the application?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Berry?
thank you. While we're canvassing our virtual room, can I add that we were notified of 2 surrounding property owners who give their support, who I'm not aware are joining us by Zoom, but would like to go on record as supporting the application. That's Robert Jarbin and Judy Huvel.
And thank you for that, I appreciate it. All right. Anyone else in support of the application? Is there anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Committee. Councillor Yule?
As printed?
And seconded by Ms.
As amended. By Ms. Berry.
Yeah, send it right on top of things today. I guess that's good. Yeah, so it's a motion by Councillor Yeo as amended, and it's seconded by Ms. Richardson as amended. All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the amended motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that's carried. Your application is approved, sir, with the septage amendment. Moving right along, we're dealing now with file number D20-2022-049, and this is 251 Slanted Road, Geographic Township of Ops. And again, Ms. Berry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of the next application is to permit the construction of a detached accessory structure in the garage. I've just heard my volume go up somewhat, and I trust I'm audible. If we may just pause for a moment and canvass our members. Can we hear me?
I can now hear you fine. I couldn't before, but I can now. Thank you.
Very well. We will proceed. Thank you, sir. Okay, 2 provisions in the bylaw requiring relief in order to get this garage built for this family. The first, that section 2.1 of the bylaw permits a maximum height of 5 meters. The proposed height is 5.7 meters. There's also a requirement in the OPS zoning bylaw that there be a 10-meter setback from a township road. The proposed setback is 9 meters, which aligns with the zone that this property falls within. So we would be recognizing a general provision, that being the setback from a township road being reduced by 1 meter. All right, so we are in an agricultural community here at 251 Slanted Road. The property is outlined on the screen at the moment, significant tree line. We'll see some images of that in the coming photos. And a layout of the property itself, we have a red square marking the proposed site of the garage, location of the dwelling in the center, and the septic tile fields to the right of the home. We have a couple of elevations here to give us an idea of what the proposed garage is to look like. Now, this will supplement or be supplemented by the coming photos, and we'll return to these elevations in a moment. If I could draw your attention to the photo at the top, we'll see the existing home in the background. And the idea for the new garage is to really reflect and stay in character with the shape of the home, and in particular, the slope of the roof. It is a steeper slope, which the owners would like to maintain and not have a garage that seems somewhat dwarfed in the presence of the dwelling. And so there is not a proposal to use the sort of upper area in the accessory building for anything other than storage. The extra height isn't needed for any kind of habitable space, although we've had those conversations. And the height itself, after reviewing the application and its merits, the site itself and the surrounding land uses, we do support, feel that it meets the 4 tests. And I'll just explain the images that we're seeing in a little bit more detail. At the top, I'm standing on approach, so on the right-of-way. Quiet day, very little traffic, safety first. And so we can see that actually the location of the truck in the front yard, between it and what is basically behind the tree line is where the garage is sited. So in other words, we really wouldn't see it from this location from the right-of-way. And I point this out because of the reduced setback that's being sought at 9 meters as opposed to the required 10 in the front yard. No impact whatsoever in our estimation on the functioning of the municipal right-of-way. The 2 photos on the bottom are both standing on the driveway just in front of the home, looking out at the yard where the proposed garage would be. The owners were quite specific about siting it in that particular location to maintain the, separation to a structure, a lean-to there for firewood. Quite difficult to see in the image, my apologies, but I'll point to it, or at least try to. Okay, unless we have absolute laser vision, which I'll be really impressed if anybody puts up their hands on that one. I'm pointing to an area behind the truck where the structure would be. We want to stay away from the tree line and away from the existing well, as well as the structure there, the lean-to. So again, the square footage, we're not looking at increasing the coverage or the permitted square footage for the accessory building, but of value to stay at that 9 meters. Typically, that extra meter of setback from the road is just to accommodate any maintenance or road widening requirements that the city may have. This road segment is not in any need of widening, and so we support the front yard reduction to 9 meters without question. The report does go into a little bit more detail as far as the sort of nature and use of the garage. Currently, the home doesn't have an attached garage. There is a utility or sort of garden shed on the opposite yard of the one that we're looking at here. But certainly the owners can make use of a new garage in their front yard. To accommodate all the stuff that goes along with their growing family. All right, Mr. Chair, we recommend approval of the increased height and the yard setback reduction. Thank you.
And thank you. Questions upon? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application?
Mr. Chair, if you'll allow me to interrupt yet again, I understand that although not online, we do have a neighbor who has called in to acknowledge his support of the application. That's James Nicholson. Thank you for that. And if I may, although this is against protocol, just refer back to the rest of the comments that we received as a result of circulation, not from the public, but I would like to add that, like the last report, we did receive comments after the report was prepared, which included comments from our supervisor of Part 8 sewage systems, that we add a similar condition for a requirement for a septic review. And I'm prepared to sort of read that language for the condition out, which would mirror the previous one we did. And forgive me, when the time is appropriate, I'll certainly do that on your ask.
So you're suggesting?
Not that I'm aware, sir. They had called in, and I'm just acknowledging that because it wasn't in the report.
Thank you for that. So we'll try one more. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to this application? All right, committee, you've heard Ms. Berry, and it's as amended, and the amendment is similar or almost identical to the one that, so do you need it heard again, or are we okay with it? Question? Yeah, go ahead, Con.
Yeah, and perhaps Ms. Berry doesn't know the answer to this, but I'm wondering why the Part 8 sewage system all of a sudden is coming up, when the sewage system is obviously on the other side of not only the house, but the driveway, and is extremely relocated from this proposal. And I know in the past, if they've been on the same side of a driveway in the past, then definitely needs to be looked at, but I'm wondering why, when it's to such separation of the two, that it's necessary.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Mr. Chair, through you to the member, this is a conversation that we have had with our supervisor of Part 8 sewage systems so that we could better understand the practice, the approach, and the operations that the Building and Septic Division perform. On occasion, it has been the case where the owners or the applicants may not have been quite aware of the extent of the sewage system if they've purchased the property recently, if they were relying on either outdated or incorrect information to feed their application. So in order to avoid or prevent some of these unfortunate occurrences that have happened in the past where we've gone out to the site after the fact and discovered that in fact a portion of the tile bed is not at all where the owners thought it was, and I'm not suggesting that's the case here, but in an abundance of caution, our supervisor of Part 8 has demonstrated on these occasions that there have been sort of these unfortunate, which become fortunate findings because either we've prevented a failure or been able to address a problem that wasn't known before because somebody was maybe looking in the wrong spot. So this is simply a double check. It is a double check, and I welcome actually the committee's feedback on that aspect of our operations. If there's information I can take back to Building and Septic to consider when we have setups exactly like this, where for all intents and purposes, as well as the position of the owners being quite certain of the location of the septic, if there's another approach that we would consider taking. I'll just add finally that I do understand also from speaking with the supervisor of Part 8 that given her experience here and also at the health unit and the access to information, the old septic system permits and approvals, the older ones that were issued by the health unit when that used to be the case, that there's a thorough sort of record search that takes place when reviewing applications like this, and sometimes they aren't found, which is another reason why we want to ensure that the system's in the right place when there's not a record of it from past installation or approval.
Yeah, and I appreciate the information, and it answered my question. It's obviously required in these two instances because it's either a property exchange recently or a lack of records being found. So I was just making sure it wasn't going to become common on every single thing that came through here. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, committee, the motion, I'm looking for a motion as amended. Okay, Councillor Yeo, and I see there Ms. Robinson. All right, Ms. Robinson seconding. Are there any further comments or questions with respect to the amended motion on the floor? All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right, we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-050, and this is 8 Lennell Avenue, Geographic Township of Verlem. Go ahead, Ms. Berry.
Mr. Chair, thank you. The purpose of the next application is to facilitate the reconstruction of a residential dwelling. There are two areas that the application seeks relief from the zoning bylaw. The first, that in addition to the front and exterior side yard setbacks of 7.5 meters, there is a section in the Verulam zoning bylaw that requires an additional 10-meter setback from the center of the road allowance. In this case, the proposed additional setback, I have indicated as 0, as has the application. There isn't a survey that we have asked for or that we have seen or can rely on, the reference plans that I've seen that indicate exactly the right-of-way width. This is a corner lot at Silver Birch and Lenal, and so we have some indication, and I've written in the report, about 3.02 meters could appear to be there, but I would prefer to err on the side of caution, and for the sake of that, recognize that the proposed additional setback would be 0 meters instead of approximating it to the 3.02, and we will see that on a reference plan here in a moment. So to recap again, although the front and exterior side yard setbacks can be achieved by the redeveloped house, it's the additional 10 meters over and above that that would result in a 17.5 meter setback requirement that cannot be achieved on this corner property. Secondly, interior side yard setback required to be 1.8 meters. The proposed is 1.46 to accommodate the new home. Now, aerial mapping is a couple of years old, and we can benefit from seeing where the previous home was sited in the center of this map. It has since been demolished. There are some pieces of the foundation that remain, some steps, etc. But this gives us an indication of how the home was sited in the past. And I'll zoom in so we can get a sense of, well, a number of things. Number one, the density of homes, the distribution of homes on surrounding lots. Also, we can see some the presence of vehicles and trailers in the right-of-way, and that gives us an indication of the width or the reduced width of Lenal runs across the, I'll indicate with the laser pointer, the southerly, lot line, and Silver Birch, the westerly lot line. Okay, now, again, get your laser eyes out. Your vision, very small, but gives us an idea, and of course this is in the report as well, under Appendix E. We can see the footprint of the previous home. It indicates, of course, contours, spot elevations, setbacks, the presence of the home to the north. I'm pointing to that right now on the adjacent lot to the north. And it was from this reference plan that we were able to sort of gauge what we would approximate the right-of-way width to be. Moving forward, some images of what is currently the condition of the site, standing on the left at the intersection of Lenal and Silver Birch, into what is currently an overgrown lot. At this point, I'm standing on Silver Birch on the right at the adjacent home to the north, the shared property line, looking into the home, into the property. So Appendix D shows us the image of what the proposed two-story home would look like, and we see in site plan its ability to comply with the exterior side yard setback in the south yard, the front yard setback in the west yard, and of course in the north yard, the reduced setback. And if we go back an image, perhaps or two, we can see the existing setback from the adjacent home to the north. And on the ground, what we see there is the driveway and garage side of that home to the north. All right, so that takes us through a tour of the supplementary pieces. A accompanying the staff report, which has evaluated the application against the 4 tests of the minor variance. Mr. Chair, we recommend approval because of the ability of the proposal, the redesigned, redeveloped lot, to uphold the intent of the waterfront designation in this community, the Thurstonia community in Verulam. We did see from earlier slides the makeup of the neighborhood, predominantly single detached homes. They do range from bungalow to 2-story housing profiles, so the proposed would be in keeping with that variety. One of the critical sort of components that we must consider with this property in particular is that it is a single lot. In the neighborhood, there are occasions where homes have been built on double lots, double wide lots, which also sometimes aids in their ability to meet those extra setbacks required in the zoning bylaw from the road, from the center of the right-of-way. This is not one of those cases, and it's compounded by the fact not only is it a single lot, but it's a corner lot, so it's sort of getting that double whammy of the requirement for the 10 meters additional on both the front and exterior side yards. We have covered this, sort of the reasoning behind the increased setbacks, but it merits repeating. On occasion, these setbacks would accommodate road widening opportunities for the municipality. This is a case where there is no interest or proposal or plan on the city's part to go through Thurstonia, certainly not Lenal or Silver Birch, to acquire lands. It would be quite difficult to do so. We saw the aerial of what the surrounding, fabric looked like, and we can see many instances of quote-unquote encroachments of existing structures. The built form does fall within that 17.5 meter setback, and although this would be sort of exacerbating that, contributing to that situation, it is the existing situation, and this would in that regard be in keeping with the built form character of this neighborhood. As a result of circulation, Mr. Chair, we did not receive any concerns or comments from any of the surrounding property owners. Public Works Roads reiterates some comments just made. No concerns with reducing setbacks for the dwelling. Public Works would prefer the holding tank to be held to the noted setback, 3 meters. We did also have no issues from our Part 8 supervisor, who has indicated the location of the existing holding tank and that at 3 meters, it's where it's going to stay. And that is acceptable, no issues in that regard. And I will conclude my comments there, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the planner? Ms. Richardson?
Through you, I'm just curious, is this home proposal on a hill? Just from the Appendix D, it appears that it must be.
Through the chair to the member, it absolutely is on a hill. Yes, not as steep as some of the ones we walked through on the various site inspections we did preparing for this meeting, but Lenal Street does have a grade, yes, towards sloping down towards the lake, and it's indicated through sort of the design of the tiered garden in the exterior yard.
Follow? No? Ms. Robinson, go ahead.
Looking at Appendix D, Leah, can you put that up on the screen? I'm just wondering what that area is on the right-hand side. Is that built space, or is it just a constructed raised terrace? What is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, you're quite right. Terrace is a much more elegant and eloquent way to describe what I referred to as tiered. So that is working with the natural grade of the property. There is a slope there, and that is landscaping is what that is. So it's not a building structure per se. I mean, there are steps, there are structures there, but that's landscaping.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anything further from committee? All right. I've lost Mr. Marsh on the screen there. Joe? All right, is the applicant online? Excuse me, does the applicant wish to speak to this application? Are they going to? Me- No. Then we'll carry on. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Committee, Mr. Strangway?
As printed.
All right. Do I have a seconder? Ms. Richardson? All right. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And I can't see Mr. Marsh, so is his audio on, Joe? No. Well, maybe he's out. Pardon? Treat him as if he's out of the room. Okay. So that passed then, we're all in favor. Okay, moving right along. Yeah, he's not feeling the best, so he may have decided to take a breather. All right, we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-051, and this is 36 Irene Avenue, former village of Sturgeon Point. Miss Berry.
Mr. Chair, thank you. At 36 Irene Avenue, we have a proposal. Carports are popular today, as are garages. So in this case, the purpose of the application would be to permit the construction of a carport. One provision in the bylaw is what is needing relief, and that is for the yard location. So the owners have chosen a front yard location for this carport because of the siting of the existing sort of structures and the layout of the property, the presence and location of the driveway, and we'll get into all that good stuff here in just a moment. So the purpose would be to permit the carport in the front yard, while the zoning only permits such structures in the side or the rear. So an area of Sturgeon Point, heavily wooded, and actually this will become a bit of a comment here in relation to not just the Conservation Authority, but also the conditions that we have included in the report. So we'll talk about this natural heritage feature in just a moment. Again, this is indicative of the age of the mapping. From this point, we don't yet see a home on the property, but one has been built. And we can see the site plan that exists today here. So the driveway winds, meanders, as it were, from Irene Avenue up through the property, beautifully landscaped, in fact. Again, heavily wooded, lots of landscaping, heavily vegetated, and we can see outlined in red the proposed carport structure located in the front yard in front of the home, the yard between the home and the road. Okay, and an image of what that carport is proposed to look like. We've got it an elevation from the front, from the side, as well as the construction details for its base, and some images provided by the applicants to supplement their application. On the left, facing west, and I've circled the home on the adjacent property. And similarly, facing east, the home on the adjacent property, through, as we can see, certainly at this time of year, with much fewer leaves on the trees, more on the ground, certainly not the image that I saw at this time of year, which is better reflected in these photos. So standing at the road on the left, not very visible. Again, we are dealing with a deep lot, and I'll just maybe take us back a couple of slides to indicate exactly how deep from the front property line to the closest corner of the carport, just under 60 meters. So substantial front yard, not very visible from the street to passersby. The image on the right indicates, and I'll used the laser pointer and I'm circling some landscaping materials here, topsoil, etc., roughly approximating the location of where the carport would be, driveway leading to the home, and an image of the finishes for the covered area in front of the home, very similar in nature to the design style of the carport, and that's intentional. The owners would very much like to keep the carport in the same design style as the home, the newly constructed home. So I'm standing at the front porch and I'm looking to this circled area in red, which, again, despite all the trees on the property, it is already a cleared area with a bit of a gravel pad. And this will become important as we talk about the natural heritage features in a moment, and a close-up of what's already in the area proposed for the siting of the carport on the image on the left. So there's a trailer and, again, some other landscaping material in this cleared area. And let's just park our photo tour there for a moment. So let's dive right into the evaluation of the application. Kawartha Conservation did raise a couple of pieces there noted in the report. We have discussed their comments since and concluded that based on the existing cleared area and the anticipated little to no additional clearing of trees being an outcome of siting the proposed carport, that a tree preservation plan or compensation plan won't be a requirement as a result of approving this minor variance. And I'll clarify some language for you there in a moment. The Sturgeon Point special policy area in the city's official plan recognizes this property within what's known as Development Plan Area 9, or DP-9, Special Exception 3. It's a mouthful, together with the significant woodlands constraint overlay. That development plan area, which isn't limited to this property, but is specific to this area of Sturgeon Point, is identified as a historic rural residential designation. The framework in the official plan provides for modest new growth reflective of available service levels while protecting natural features and resources, and specifically including the maintenance of tree cover. Policies direct development away from reducing this tree cover, certainly keeping the natural landscape in pristine condition. Building location, new construction should complement existing topography, vegetation to ensure privacy between dwelling units. That's why we've sort of set this up to show you the presence of the adjacent homes, as well as the features on this site. And we certainly can conclude that the addition of a carport here is not contravening the objectives of the development plan area and retaining those values of the historic rural residential framework. Kawartha Region Conservation Authority's comments identified that they would only support the development if no trees or saplings of any diameter were removed. Should the development require the removal of any trees or saplings, the Conservation Authority would request that the proponent submit the planting plan or a tree compensation plan in lieu of doing a full environmental impact study. Of course, the purpose of an EIS would be to demonstrate no negative impacts to the significant woodland or its ecological functions. Okay, we have, as I indicated earlier, had some follow-up discussions with KRCA. They have a better understanding of what the applicants are proposing. The owners themselves also have communicated with the KRCA their plans and reiterated their intentions to not remove and not need to remove any trees, and the KRCA is comfortable with their development plans. And that leads me to conclude that in addition to recommending approval of the minor variance, we would remove condition number 3 tying the approval to any subsequent works that the KRCA would sign off on, which they are supportive of. I will add that. I'm not going rogue here. This is something that we discussed with the Conservation Authority ahead of time. No additional comments received from any of the agencies or from the public of concern or of objection. And so we support the application. Mr. Chair, I'll leave it there.
All right, thank you. Question to the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
The applicant is online. I just want to extend my thanks to Lee Berry for all of the hard work she has done in trying to properly understand this minor variance, and I'm very grateful for her help.
And what is your name, sir?
My name is Flavel Barrett.
All right.
My wife and I are the owners of the property.
All right, and thank you for that. Are there any questions of the deputant or applicant? All right. Did you wish to say anything further to the application, sir?
No?
All right, thank you. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application, in support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Mr. Marsh, did I see your hand there? All right, Mr. Marsh, you're moving the motion? All right, seconded by Mr. Strangway. Any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Yes, a question, Ms. Rich.
Is the motion with or without condition number 3?
Yeah, I meant to ask that and got cut.
Without number 3 as amended, sorry.
Ms. Berry, do you wish it to remain, or because I wasn't clear on that either? Be taken away.
Apologies, I should have just been more clear. We can remove condition 3.
We could. All right. So as amended then, Mr. Marsh?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, question?
Perfect.
Yeah. Right. Any further comments or questions? All right. The motion on the floor as amended. All those in favor? And that carries. Your application is approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
And moving right along, we're now dealing with file number D20-2022-052, and this is 439 Farmstead Road, Geographic Township of Mariposa. Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of the next minor variance application is to permit the construction of a garage, a detached accessory structure. And in this case, with respect to the Mariposa zoning bylaw, there are 4 areas of relief in order to facilitate the construction of this new garage. So starting from the top, we would be looking to site the garage in the front yard, while the bylaw only permits for accessory structures in the side and rear. Next, an increase in square footage. The bylaw permits a maximum of 150 square meters, and the proposed is exceeding that up to 182 square meters. Next, the height is proposed at 5.7 meters over the maximum of 5 meters. And finally, recognizing that the garage would be contributing to the overall number collectively of accessory buildings on the property in Mariposa, that is limited to 2. And in this case, this would be number 4. Okay, Mr. Chair, so let's do a brief tour through the planning reports as we are touching on a series of reliefs from the zoning bylaw, and we want to ensure that we're explaining why we've been able to conclude that this is an appropriate application and should be approved. We have evaluated the 4 tests taken a look at the official plan designation, which is prime agricultural. Some special features in this area. The aerial helps us see what is the beginnings of that to the north and to the west. So we move from, and this is an area southwest of Oakwood, the community of Oakwood. And we're moving from a predominantly agricultural area into an area that has natural heritage features, and they take the form of significant woodlands, provincially and locally significant wetlands, as well as an unevaluated wetland, the trifecta of features. The zoning is A1 agricultural, and the lot is just over an acre. So with respect to the appropriateness of this proposal, the proposed garage, of course, is going to result in some additional storage on the property, but in addition, an enclosed workshop area that's currently lacking. The property is screened from the road, and the two surrounding neighbors, and we can see them both south of the road on the map that's in front of you currently. And the location in the front yard would actually take advantage of an existing second driveway, and we have been notified and confirmed that an entrance permit for that second driveway has been obtained. Now, the property itself is just over an acre, and we get a fairly decent idea of the layout of the property from the aerial. Let's zoom into the actual site plan and see that there is quite an extensive tile bed in the center area of the property between the red outline of the proposed garage. I will get my laser pointing here in a moment. So currently I'm circling the center of the image to indicate the approximate location of the septic bed. And to the right is the home with an accessory building there, a little shed, and of course the driveway out to Farmstead Road here. Proposed second driveway. I'm pointing to the words proposed driveway in front of the garage there. So I just wanted to point out so that you're aware that we have a number of constraints limiting the location of this garage to where it is on the site plan. So A, the location of the septic system. We're taking into account future setbacks here should that system need replacing. Existing buildings and structures, of course, I pointed out the dwelling. There, in addition to the utility shed that I pointed out, there's also a garden shed and a gazebo that's indicated just behind the dwelling. The existing landscaping and gardens throughout the property, the amenity space, and we'll see photos in a minute of what that space is being used for, but also the separation distances to the features, and those have been specifically pointed out to us by the Conservation Authority. So again, we're flagging the significant woodlands and the series of wetlands and the buffers that we want to stay outside of, really constrain or rather help us hone in on what the ideal siting is from that perspective of the proposed garage. Okay, there were actually a series of site inspections that have taken place for this application from city staff, both in planning and in building and septic, as well as Conservation Authority staff who were really quite amazed by the property and the collection of natural heritage features that are evident here. It's a bit of a unicorn in that sense in some of the features that have been flagged. So just noting that for your interest. Here we see the elevations that are proposed, and I'm going to just highlight and circled in red is the height. Now, the application itself read 5.7 meters, which results in 18.7 feet. However, the construction drawings had indicated the midpoint of the roof at the bylaw maximum 5 meters. So I've circled that conversion, which is close to 16.4, 16 feet 4 inches. That's not correct. Correct would be the 18.7 feet or the 5.7 meters. So we identify this because it is tied to the decision so that the text of the decision matches the details in the site plan, should the committee elect to approve this. A couple of images for your reference. If If you haven't had the opportunity, take a little drive down here. We're heading on Farmstead in a westerly. We're facing west. The existing driveway into the home I'm pointing at now is the first entrance. And now in front of the second entrance, see an existing shed. And this one's actually going to have to be relocated, sited further north on the property because the proposed new garage would be sited here with this easy access to the road. We've got a volleyball net set up here as some recreation potential and obviously active use. Again, we're opposite now, standing at the road looking at the shed. Here I'm at the rear property line, also looking at the shed and the entrance that's been approved. Standing at the edge of the existing shed to give us an idea of the distance between where the proposed garage would be and the side of the dwelling. This area here for the septic system that's already in place. We want to stay outside of that extensive septic field. The siting of the lot, and we'll perhaps just leave it here, in my opinion, having been there and taking a look at the features that are on the site, the layout of the structures, in my opinion, would certainly be able to accommodate the additional square footage that's being sought with this garage. I think that the lot is sort of, just well positioned to absorb the extra ground floor area. The location in the front yard, absolutely not an issue with the heavy vegetation that screens it from the road itself. Access, of course, supplemented and supported by the second entrance that's been approved. Turning back to the square footage and the coverage just a moment, the Mariposa zoning bylaw has two provisions that look to square footage and ground floor area. And I just want to note that based on the lot size, although the garage would be exceeding the ground floor area, it still is well under the maximum coverage for accessory buildings. And that's collectively taking into account all of the 4, which this would result in, accessory buildings that we still are under that 10% cap. By about 6%, in fact, the report tells us, at 4.1%. So on this basis, we support the variance application. I want to point out that notwithstanding the comments that were included at the time the report was prepared, we have received updated comments from our Part 8 sewage supervisor that no further issues result. They have done a subsequent follow-up site inspection and have no objection to the proposal. And finally, we haven't received any concerns or issues from any of the neighbors. And with that, I shall conclude my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Just for clarification for the committee, if we look on page 4 of 6, Fourth, the conservation. A permit will be required to Ontario Regulation 1A206, and I realize that'll be all dealt with, I believe, through the building, but unless I missed the meeting, it says, based on our records, a permit has already been issued for the development related to the proposed minor variance. What is that all about?
On occasion, Mr. Chair, applicants, property owners will approach the Conservation Authority, maybe through dealings with other staff, maybe through some initial exploration with planning staff or building staff who indicate that the lands are regulated. Sometimes property owners learn about this through other channels. But when they learn that their lands are within a regulated area of the Conservation Authority, some elect to just approach the Conservation Authority without the trigger through either a Planning Act application review or a building permit application process. And that was the case here. The owners were informed that they are within an area of interest to the Conservation Authority and took the necessary steps to apply for a permit. Now, permit issuance is under the Conservation Authorities Act. It is another arm of the responsibilities that the Conservation Authority has. Reviewing Planning Act applications is another service that they provide. So in addition to the review that they do under the permit requirements in that regulation that's noted, it's quite reasonable and acceptable for a regs permit to be issued ahead of a minor variance approval. They are not connected, and one is not reliant on the other. on occasion when this hasn't yet been done, we don't normally include it as a condition either because it's captured under the building permit process.
Thank you. Any questions to the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hi there. Yes, we are online.
And your name?
We're a little bit dark. My name is Lena Reed, and this is my husband, Kevin Reed.
All right. Go ahead, please.
We just wanted to take a moment to, first of all, thank Leah for her support and clarification throughout this entire process. And we also wanted to thank the council for listening today to our application.
I'm not sure we were clear on everything you said, but I think we got the gist of it.
Thank you so much.
Questions of the applicant? All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Committee? Councillor?
As printed?
As printed. Do I have a seconder? Ms. Robinson? All right. So moved by Councillor Yeo, seconded by Ms. Robinson. And are there any further comments or questions with respect to the motion on the floor? Being none, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Your application is approved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. All right, moving right along, we're dealing with file number D20-2022-053, and this is 110 Wilkinson Drive, Geographic Township of Somerville. And Ms. Berry, we have a memorandum from you with respect to a deferral. Would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a result of circulation of the application, Kawartha Conservation identified the presence of karst topography, which, for the benefit of the members who may not be aware, is considered a natural hazard feature and is of provincial significance. It warrants further evaluation to determine the merits of undertaking a geotechnical study that would address all of the hazards or risks associated with karst. And in other words, it's the unstable bedrock, predominantly limestone. And without having a little more comfort around the extent of the soil's integrity, we think that it is reasonable and have discussed both with the Conservation Authority and with the owners our position that we would prefer to have a little more comfort around what the quality of the soils are there before we continue with the evaluation of the merits of the application. The application itself, Mr. Chair, is to essentially facilitate the redevelopment of the property. Specifically, the application seeks relief for the water setback. That's all. It would be to allow for a reduced water setback as well as the continuation of existing side yard encroachment. So although those are the two aspects of the application, by extension and looking at overall the impacts of what the proposal and the new cottage, new home would result in, we want to again ensure that if there are any substantive issues, that the owners be made aware of them, which they have now been, and we receive the benefit to inform the committee the benefit of the geotechnical works, at least starting with an initial assessment by a professional consultant who I understand already has been retained by the owners to take a look and start this next step of evaluation. Now, we understand in speaking with the owners that there is probably an unrealistic time constraint here if we were to ask the committee to consider a deferral to have the matter returned to the September meeting. I would make one slight adjustment to our deferral recommendation and simply put that we bring the application back before the last meeting of the year or sooner if we have the results back from the consultant that's been retained to take a look at this karst matter. Those are the reasons, Mr. Chair, for our deferral. I turn it back to you.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? All right. Is the applicant online? Do you wish to speak to the deferral?
We are online. It's Colleen and Gary Smoky.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I got two people. Whoever wants to speak, could I have your name, please?
Colleen Samogi.
Thank you. And do you wish to speak to the deferral?
No, just that we need the time for the geotechnical engineer to be able to review if there are any karst hazards on our property.
All right, thank you. Then I move to, any questions of the applicant? All right, committee, then you heard it, so it's a motion to defer, to come back no later, I guess, than our last meeting, or before, if it's prepared or ready to come, correct? Yeah, all right, I think you can figure out the verbiage. All right, Ms. Richardson, and do I have a seconder? Mr. Marsh? All right, so you're aware of the motion on the floor? All in favor? And that carries. Zor, you're okay with that? Yes? All right, you got that? We're dealing with file number D20-2022-054, and this is 1469 Killarney Bay Road, Geographic Township of Finland. Go ahead, Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. We are on to our next minor variance application. The purpose and effects of this application results in the reconstruction of a residential dwelling. The home is, and we'll see this in the photos, currently under construction. The relief that is being sought is a encroachment in the front yard. The bylaw requires that the front yard setback be 7.5 meters. The siting of the new home, or the reconstructed home, encroaches by about 3 square feet into the front yard, one corner of the new attached garage in the front yard, resulting in, at one point, a reduced setback down to 6.87 meters. And so we'll get into the particulars of how this occurred and why right now. So just I'll point out on this location map, using my trusty laser pointer in red, that we can see that Killarney Bay Road, as we come sort of northerly, westerly, if I can put it that way, that there is a irregularity in the width of Killarney Bay, in that it widens at the north corner of the property before it turns west into Balsam Lake. This is not a municipal road. This is a private road allowance. However, it's assumed by service by the municipality. But the fact that it is a private road plays into how we apply the zoning bylaw in a couple of aspects. So we'll point that out as we get to those images. So again, we are looking at this and evaluating the application based on the impact of the front yard encroachment. This is an image that depicts what the former home looked like. We've actually done our best to mock up a lot boundary. If we were to pull up this lot on our GIS viewer, we would see that the blue line is shifted quite a bit off to the south. So we've just superimposed the shape of the lot more commensurate with actually the siting of the property, but it's still not perfect, capturing a little bit of the existing boathouse. And again, this home was the former home before the reconstruction was underway. What we're looking at here, and what forms part of the staff report at Appendix C, is the materials submitted as part of the building permit application process. Now, I'll take a moment to add that the applicant, RWH Construction, did undergo a pre-screening process with staff in our department last year, or at least initiated it to discuss the siting of the home. At that time, the interest was in the proposed deck at the rear of the property, and the reason for the pre-screening was to evaluate the merits of a deck encroachment into the water setback. Well, it was decided, not through the completion of the pre-screening application, which ended up not being processed, and instead, the owners, in working together with their builder, RWH, and through the building permit process, were able to site the home to meet the front yard setback of 7.5 meters and move the home entirely out of the rear yard water setback. And my apologies for those on Zoom. I'm now pointing to the image on the right from Balsam Lake in the rear yard to the back of the home, indicating the presence and location of the home, the proposed footprint staying entirely out of the water rear yard setback, maintaining the 7.5 required rear yard at one point of the road segment. However, of course, with the property line not having a regular rectangular shape at its easterly lot area point, that we have to accommodate for that departure from the 7.5, and this corner of the garage does result in encroaching and leaving the side, the front yard at 6.87. So that is hopefully explaining to you how we ended up with a building under construction within this front yard. Number one, eliminating the need for a variance in the rear yard, keeping the entire envelope outside of the water setback, which is of course in line with the official plan designation and intent of the zoning bylaw in that regard, but again based on the lot fabric and the width of the private right-of-way causing the reduction. On the ground, this is what we see. On approach to the property, here we have the benefit of seeing sort of the front, what we at times refer to as an established building line, what the home on the adjacent property, how it is sited in comparison to the new home under construction, which we can see here, standing in the right-of-way, looking at the construction taking place. And the other benefit of the photo on the left and the center photo is giving us the sort of visual on how the road veers west to the lake behind this row of trees. Okay, so Killarney Bay Road veering to the west. A little bit of a perhaps better indication here. Of course, it's in the shade, but this is functioning in two capacities. One, into the driveway to the neighboring property, number 1470, Killarney Bay, but also through this tree line out into Balsam Lake. Since I've mentioned 1470, let's take a look on, from an aerial perspective, how we access 1470 through here. And the right-of-way I'm indicating across the tree canopy in between the roof and the boathouse out to Balsam Lake. Okay. And standing in the private road allowance at the what I estimate is sort of the beginning of the driveway entrance to the neighbor at 1470, taking a look backwards at the home under construction and what the right-of-way looks like in terms of the turning radius, the driveway width, not only the driveway width for the existing lot, the existing driveway, which is in a permitted location, but also the right-of-way width for Killarney Bay. The application itself is reviewed and evaluated, and we report on that in what you have before you in terms of, in our estimation, its compliance with the 4 tests of the minor variance. It's a use that is permitted in the waterfront area with being sensitive to the shoreline setback, of course. With respect to the zoning bylaw, the reduction from 7.5 to 6 0.87 for the 3 square feet of the garage in the front yard is, in our estimation, anticipated to not create any kind of hazard in the private right-of-way. We think that that is still certainly providing for any kind of maintenance that needs to take place in the right-of-way. Can also accommodate cars in the driveway, fully on site, meaning on private property for number 1469, the owner's property, and will not prevent any hazard in that regard. Kawartha Conservation commented with respect to the natural hazard features, the natural heritage features, of course, the woodland being in proximity to fish habitat, flooding and erosion hazards, possibility of them being a hazard feature on the site and in general in this area, and of course being within the Balsam and Cameron Lake management plans. Through evaluating the work ahead of the minor variance application, this is another occasion where the contractors knew to work with Kawartha Conservation in obtaining a development permit from Kawartha Conservation. So that has taken place and the permit was issued, as was the building permit, which is how the construction was able to take place. Overall, again, at the time we prepared the report, we concluded that the minor variance met the 4 tests and was a reasonable and appropriate development. Since the publication of the report and as a result of notice to the surrounding property owners, we have received a letter which has been circulated to the committee members as well as to the owner, to the applicant. And so I'm not aware of whether the neighbor who provided the concerns, his letter of objection, is on the line or not, and I suspect perhaps not. So I'll summarize the comments for our purposes here, and I am aware that we had a request for another neighbor who has registered to speak, although we attempted to make contact just to understand the nature of her interests in the application. Hadn't yet heard back, but I understand has an interest and is registered to speak, Mr. Chair, when the time comes for that. So in brief, let's turn to the comments submitted, supplemented by a series of photographs and descriptions from the adjacent property owner and number 1470 that we referred to and identified the property earlier on in the presentation. The majority of the concerns flagged through circulation of the application for the variance have been are being reiterated. They have been noted in the past previously with Kawartha Conservation staff who in response had taken the action that they would in accordance with their permitting and enforcement responsibilities. I won't focus on the specifics of the concerns regarding matters connected to Kawartha Conservation's permit, but what I will focus on are matters related to the variance and the impact of a new home at this location with a front yard encroachment into the setback. And those can be found on the second page of the submission. Throughout the construction phase, the neighbors have allowed the construction teams to park on private property not belonging to the subject property. It's an inconvenience, demonstrated a lack of space in the area. Construction is temporary, but once the project is completed, the permanence of the variance and congestion created will be there forever. The congestion and lack of a proper driveway could impede egress of large vehicles, including the author's personal large vehicles, but more importantly, emergency services if needed. The maximized lot use and lack of space will mean snow removal from the proposed site will end up in the road, impeding safe travel for others. The congestion will make enjoyable use of the roadway unsafe for those biking and walking, as has been demonstrated through the construction period to date. Finally, the new entrance with the added congestion will impede line of sight for vehicular travel. We have carefully considered the comments and reflected on, of course, we only have 3 photos here of the site for your reference. Spent quite a bit of time exploring the neighborhood and taking a look at the possibility for the movement of vehicles in anticipation of outcomes. Of course, this preceded the comments submitted by the neighboring property owner. I'll just point out that there is an adjacent parcel across the right-of-way that is also owned by the property owner, subject of this application, which is used by the property owner. In fact, I'm quite certain I used it to park my vehicle when I was there taking a look at the site. So there is an opportunity to park both on the property, on both sides of the right-of-way. That would appear entirely legitimate. Now, in response, the Conservation Authority, as well as Mr. Hayter from RWH Construction, provided some follow-up comments, and I'll share those with you now. The contractor confirms that they obtained all permits, followed all the guidelines, and had all the inspections and additional inspections as requested by the neighbors at 1470. The references in the neighbors' concerns regarding the ditch and the debris, the construction materials, the lack of adhering to procedures and requirements as part of the control measures for construction activities in proximity to ditches, to creeks, to floodplains, to the lake. With respect to that assertion in the neighbors' comments, the response from the contractor was, when looking at the completed ditch, that it was completed to the KRCA permit guidelines. In their opinion, it's an improvement to the original condition of the ditch. The owner, we understand, also has taken it upon herself to solve the erosion issue that was happening on not only the private right-of-way to the lake, but also on her own property, which forms part of this ditch area. So the ditch itself isn't limited to the private right-of-way, but also overlaps on her own property. During the winter and spring, silt fences were installed, maintained, and inspected by the Conservation Authority. During construction of the ditch, a silt fence was installed and maintained. Finally, the septic holding tank has been permitted, installed, and inspected by the septic division at the city. Lastly, we had a comment from the Conservation Authority. In response to the concerns raised, of course, we wanted them to have an opportunity to review the comments and the suggestions that were made, and received a follow-up from the compliance officer and permitting technician from KRCA. The only action that KRCA will be taking on this file is to complete a follow-up inspection. The previous inspection was completed on April 28th. They did flag some deficiencies relating to ESCs, which are erosion and sediment controls. The follow-up inspection would determine if the ESCs, the erosion and sediment controls, were repaired and maintained, and at that point, if any cleanup of the watercourse or lake are necessary as a result of inefficient ESCs. So we understand from this that the KRCA is, as is the contractor, working in this iterative fashion in accordance with the permit protocols. So that is where I will pause my commentary on results of circulation of the application, but I will conclude that after evaluating the comments from both the neighbors, of course we haven't yet heard from any public submissions made today, but our recommendation stands. We still think that the encroachment to 6.87 meters is reasonable and results in appropriate use of the property. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there questions, panel? Yes, Mr. Strangway, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a number of questions. First of all, Ms. Berry, I'm correct then in assuming that there's a full building permit in place and everything with respect to building applications has been done correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we did have comments from our plans examiner through circulation of the application. And they were as follows: as-built grading plan required along with foundation control certificate. I had asked about the issuance of the building permit, and yes, a building permit was issued. The house was resited or relocated, again, to accommodate the building envelope being moved out of the water setback or the rear yard setback. So on the grading plan that was attached to the building permit that the building division staff reviewed would not have indicated the 6.87 reduction that is being sought through the variance. It was flagged at the foundation control stage of the building permit process. So that is where works paused and the planning process took over. Did I even remotely answer your question, Member Strangway?
I was looking for a very simple yes or no.
It occurred to me while I started answering that I hadn't actually given the committee the comments from the building division. So that was perhaps a twofer in my mind. And can I say yes?
Yes.
How's that? Okay.
Okay, next question. In some of the comments I saw, there was a reference to a stream. I don't believe Kawartha Conservation mentioned that, and I'm not aware of any stream in that area. Is this just simply drainage when we have a lot of rain? There's no stream in that area, is that correct?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, we also didn't observe the presence of a stream. Now, the terminology may mean something to different individuals, any sort of variety of water courses. This is not a stream by standards that we speak to through the zoning bylaw, for example. Also was not observed as a stream through Kawartha Conservation's comments in relation to the variance application when looking at heritage and hazard features, which in all occasions wetlands would feature under, and also not indicated through their permanent requirements either.
Thank you. With regard to the septic, do I understand correctly it's a holding tank as opposed to a septic system?
That is correct. Through to the member, it had is operating on a holding tank. The property was operating on a holding tank.
Okay. Just to follow up on that, Ms. Berry, I noticed the holding tank or septic is across the road from the house. And being familiar with this area, there's always been a turnaround down at the end of Killarney Bay Road for things like snowplows and larger vehicles and even cars. Does that turnaround still exist, or is there now an issue with that?
In my opinion, there is room to turn around, and I'm going to take us to either this aerial map or this location map. In both cases, we see the presence of lands adjacent to what is the right-of-way for Killarney Bay. Now, again, this area that I'm pointing to in the center of the right-of-way with the laser pointer roughly falls in this area that I'm pointing to, what otherwise looks like pavement and is pavement in between, well, the driveway access here, going to the north in between the two sets of trees, batches of trees. A turnaround. Can I turn around there? Yes, I can. Am I turning around using somebody else's private property outside of the private property of the right-of-way? Yes, in all likelihood, I'm doing that, although I wouldn't at this point be able to comment on ownership status of this property. although we can, certainly look into that. But I don't believe that that's what you are asking about. Just, in my opinion, whether there's room to turn around there. What was there, I can't speak to what was there in years past. But as of recent site visit, maybe can we see an ability to turn the car around?
Right. That
Here.
big area that that big area you're just pointing to right there, that's where the turnaround is. Now, Killarney Bay being a private road, does our Public Works Department make any comment on an application like this as far as a turnaround, or do they not comment on this?
Through to the member, they don't, no. We recognize that there is an assumption by service seasonally, but in terms of the functioning of the right-of-way, with it being a private road status, they do not.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor?
Yeah, thank you. And just to the, Mr. Strangway's point, Public Works does require a turnaround to do that service. And so there's all likelihood, an agreement to use that property with Public Works as part of the limited service agreement. So that's just the way it's happened in other circumstances that I've dealt with.
Further questions of, Ms.
Through you, in the letter from the person objecting, they're saying that the applicant tried to move the creek and were denied permission by Kawartha Conservation. Could you point out where this creek is, and is this in fact a true statement?
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, I don't know that I'm able to point it out because I didn't observe it myself. So if I may, pending attendance virtually, perhaps the neighbor would be able to point that out, but I wouldn't be able to.
I'm not sure what to suggest to you either, so.
Again, if it was something that I myself had observed, I'd be able to point to the location of what I saw. But when comparing the photos and the documentation that we were presented with, which you have, and I presume you're looking at there, I don't have a way to sort of ground truth what I saw with the area map.
I'm the neighbor, if I may speak.
No, you may not, sir.
sorry.
We'll just hang on a minute.
I apologize.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Berry.
To conclude that thought, is that because I didn't observe it on reflection, I don't have an accurate way to pinpoint what may or may not be there, but I understand there might be another way to solve this mystery. That's it, Mr. Chair.
Perhaps hold that thought until we... right. Any further questions of the planner? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hi, yes.
Your name,
Ryan
sir?
Hayter. Ryan Hayter.
Go ahead.
I'm the applicant, and first of all, I'd like to thank the committee and Ms. Berry for having a look at this and all the hard work that goes into this and every application. I have a couple answers for Mr. Strangway regarding the back lot and the initially proposed site plan that we sent in showing a septic on the backyard. In order to get an approval to do the septic on the backyard, it can't go through the regular process with the city. It has to go through an MECP approval process. And there were just too many hurdles to overcome to get that septic on the back lot approved. So we went ahead with the holding tank on the main lot. So on that back lot is 50 by 100, and it's offset from the property, so that usable turnaround area doesn't get affected. What will be there now is just parking for additional cars for the owner, and won't interrupt any of the turnaround that is there right now. If that helps with any of those questions that were going around with that. Regarding the ditch or the creek or the water course, in the initial conversations with the Conservation Authority, we asked about the possibility of moving the creek off of Mrs. Thrasher's property and into the intended right-of-way of where it is. There's a 20-foot right-of-way that goes towards the lake from Clarny Bay Road. The actual culvert and most of the ditch at Clarny Bay Road is on Miss Thrasher's property and angles towards the lake. So about, say, 100 feet into the property, or maybe less, 75 feet, it's onto the right-of-way. Conservation Authority said that we weren't allowed to do that. So we said, okay, and we came up with a plan to make the ditch erosion proof and keep her part of the property nice and extend it into where the right of way is, and allow the water to go through there when it rains and when the snow melts in the spring.
All right, Mr. Strangway or Ms. Richardson, any questions of the applicant?
No, Ryan, I appreciate that. On the diagram we're looking at, it shows the septic across the road. So that's certainly answered that problem, and the one also about the stream, creek. Thank you very much, Ryan.
You're welcome.
Ms. Richardson, anything further?
Oh, that's fine, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Mr. Marsh, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the applicant. So is this a creek, or is it an intermittent creek? Is it something that runs just in the spring, or?
It runs in the spring and on the occasional heavy, long.
Right, so it's a runoff. It's not a creek.
It's dry right now, and I haven't seen it running in.
All right. The other thing I just wanted to make sure, and you have a proper permit for the holding tank.
Correct. It's installed.
It's been approved, and I don't think the health unit would be approving it if it weren't on the property.
They've inspected and approved it. It's done.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything further from committee members? All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application?
Yes,
And your name, sir?
my name is Edmund Wong. I reside at 1470 Killarney Bay Road.
Hey, go ahead, sir.
Firstly, I apologize for initially trying to speak earlier. I am not familiar with the process. I thank the chair for allowing me to speak now and the committee for all their hard work. I'd like to point out that there were two applications for the septic one that they were denied because it is a creek. It is not a ditch. They consistently, for example, in this current application, refer to the water line where it is. It is a creek. There's wildlife and habitat that utilizes this creek, and I've sent pictures of the sediment that enters into Killarney Bay when there is rainfall due to their construction process. The first time was that they were informed it was a creek and they couldn't move the culvert. It's moot right now to argue whether they can build. They've already built, and through the entire process, it's always been an ask and forgive later after it's done. And it's clear they're doing it again. This creek would obviously, this waterway, and I've submitted diagrams of it it's recognized on government maps, and MOE was involved in the septic system debate, whether it should be allowed, and it was determined to be a creek and a significant waterway into Balsam Lake. So I want to be consistent with that, so no one else keeps saying it's a ditch and a runaway, because this waterway is important, and the ecology of this waterway, to me, should be protected. As far as the minimal requirements of the variance that they're requesting, the only consideration I'd have asking this is there is a new entranceway and a permit should be applied for, and the consideration for all that shrubs and visible sightline between the neighbor on the other side be considered, because there's no way to back out of there safely right now without proper sightlines. So my main objection to this is really the terminology of a creek versus a ditch, which I think is very important here because it affects setbacks, which they obviously haven't adhered to in this construction, and the safety of the road. And I point out also on this road, this creek goes behind where the proposed septic system was proposed, and it was way too close. They were denied that. And that creek really swells up in the spring. It does also, like Mr. Hayter pointed out, overflows or fills up with heavy rainfall, and hence that sediment picture I sent.
All right, thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the deputy committee? All right, thank you. Is there anyone else online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? All right, being none. Committee. Before I do that, back to the applicant. Do you wish to respond to any of the comments that were made, sir?
No, sorry, I don't have any response to any of that.
All right, thank you. Did you wish to speak?
Mr. Chair, I would just like to point out that I hear what the neighbor is saying with respect to the classification that he has been made aware of, that maybe another agency of the government has identified or discussed. I, for my own curiosity and for the benefit of addressing the submission, would like to explore that, but I really more importantly just want to underscore that Kawartha Conservation refers to the lands that I now understand are what is the creek that's been quote unquote referred to as a drainage ditch. I'm not commenting on whether that's right or wrong. I'm indifferent, neutral, just identifying that as far as their mapping goes, including also the city's mapping, and importantly the zoning does not identify environmental protection or hazard zone that is typically associated with a wetland feature, such as a creek or other waterbed, that's absent here. So no EP zoning, no additional requirement for increased setbacks, and in fact, as I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, we can see the side yard setbacks on the north side of the dwelling adjacent to the extension of the private right-of-way being just under 3.5 meters. Typically, in a municipal road scenario, an exterior yard is what you have for a corner lot. You have your front yard and your exterior yard extending, which in this case would be that portion of land going out to Balsam Lake. However, private roads do not have this provision applied to them, only municipal roads, which is why that setback of 3.49 is perfectly acceptable. It is in keeping with what is considered an interior side yard. So there isn't a requirement in the zoning for any additional setbacks from the north property line or the features within that private right-of-way. That's it. Thank you for the opportunity. Sorry, I didn't add, and I will now, so it's not it. One other point, that through the building permit process, the driveway entrance has been vetted and approved through that process. I do have the contact information for the neighbor and will, unrelated to this variance, take it upon myself to understand better this position, because this obviously is an important matter to the neighbor, and I'd like to just explore that more. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Nguyen, I'm going to go back to you if you're still available. You heard the comments from our manager of planning with respect to the ditch, creek, whatever we want to call it. Do you wish to respond to that at all? We can't hear you, sir.
I really didn't realize I was on video. I didn't realize the process and how this would go through. I'm very frustrated, obviously, having dealt with the builder and the homeowner having to fight twice already with preserving the creek. And I guess at this point, it's built. I just want it on record that this is a significant waterway. That was my main concern.
All right, and thank you. Yeah, your comments are duly noted, and if you do have further queries, I would suggest that certainly call the manager of planning and see if you can get some clarification on those, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Again, to the applicant, do you have any further comments?
Same, not again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, and on the decision here, I'll give you it as printed.
Do I have a seconder? Ms. Richardson? Any further comments or questions on the motion on the floor? All those in favor? And that carries. Your application is approved, sir.
Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee.
We've been going for just about 2 hours and a half. Do you want to take a break or do you want to finish off? Break? Yeah, we'll take 5. All right, so we're back in gear and we're dealing with file number D20-2022-055, and this is 5 Niels Drive, Geographic Township of Members, and go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we now are looking at an application to facilitate construction of an addition to a dwelling. The addition would house an attached garage as well as an ARU, an additional residential unit. So 3 areas of the zoning bylaw for Township of Manvers need to be addressed. Number 1, the lot area. So with respect to supporting a new dwelling unit, the ARU, the minimum lot area is 4,000 square meters when the lot is serviced with private individual services. The existing lot area falls under that and is at 2630.42 square meters. Next, minimum side yard setback of 3 meters in the zoning bylaw. The proposed setback to accommodate the addition is less 1 meter, so it would result in a 2 meter setback. Finally, the front yard requirement in Manvers in this zone is 15 meters, and the proposed setback is 10.9. Okay, we're at 5 Niels Drive, as our chair introduced, and we'll move from the location map, identifying the property in the hamlet of Janetville, and an aerial to show us how the lot's buildings and structures are distributed across the site. The lot is a through lot. It has roadways abutting both north and south ends of the property. And the proposed lot layout, which you'll find at Appendix C of your report. So outlined in red to the right of the lot on this site plan indicates the proposed 3-car garage. It would be replacing the existing 2-car garage that's there now. And then further south behind the garage would be the single-story ARU, the narrow addition out the back of the garage to contain the residential dwelling unit. Okay, so here we see from Niels Drive the front of the home, the existing driveway with the 2 adjacent residential dwellings. And standing in sort of the central area of the rear yard, looking towards Niels Drive, we see an existing shed, which is in the interior side yard setback already. And I'll point to it with the laser pointer for those in the room. I'm pointing to the white structure, the shed at the sort of beyond the extent of the driveway from Niels Drive, adjacent to the existing 2-car garage. Which sits in front of this trailer. All right, and now honing in a little closer to the existing 2-car garage in the photo on the left. We see again the presence of an existing shed, which is within the side yard already. The approximate extent of the addition is indicated here. In fact, this is showing us what the existing setback is from the 2-car garage to the property line, about 3.96 meters. And in the picture beside it on the right, we have the property owner doing a little bit of modeling for us and standing approximately on the shared property line between the 2 residential lots. Okay, now turning to the evaluation of the application, we certainly recognize that the policy framework at the city as of the past couple of years promotes and supports this type of new housing option. Introducing a new additional residential unit gently intensifies neighborhoods just like this, otherwise low density, provide homeowners with their independence as they age in their own homes with the support of family when needed. And so the idea here is that the homeowners who would move into the suite, the new proposed ARU, would then accommodate their children and family living in the primary dwelling in years to come. The actual location of the garage addition is certainly logical given the existing floor plan and placement of the two-car garage. While sited on the property, its intention is to maintain the front wall of the dwelling and the existing building line. So the majority of the addition, as we saw on the site plan, would come to the rear behind the front wall of the existing home. And in that regard, the front yard reduction is certainly acceptable. We'll be familiar with many other zones where a front yard is typically in the range of 7.5 meters. In Manvers in this area, that zoning has increased to about 10 meters to recognize an even sort of greater front yard open space setback from the road for that particular character contribution to the build form. So recognizing that we are in a hamlet settlement area, an ARU is permitted within the designation. Both the official plan and the zoning give us guidance to review departure from when minimum lot areas are acceptable to be reduced from their minimum 4,000 square meters in the case of ARUs. Now, in this instance, two components provide the rationale for the reduction. Number one, an alternative treatment system for dealing with the additional septic has been designed and has been proposed and vetted through the city's septic division. So on the lot size and the proposed location and based on the again, the advanced treatment system, it's a newer technology beyond the traditional class 4 septic system, can certainly be accommodated on the property. Number one. But number two, this is also a lot that doesn't entirely depend on private services. It is connected to municipal water. And for those two reasons, the reduced lot area is acceptable under the circumstances. To focus on the other elements of the proposal, and that is the side yard setback, the reduction of 1 meter. And we'll go to the plan of the property here, just again to reorient ourselves. So the reduction would be in the yard closest to the intersection with Manvers Drive, forgive me, to the east property line is where the reduction would be proposed. And when we take a look at the lot fabric, the dimensions of the property, so essentially the boundaries of the lot, and had a good sense of this standing on the property, looking from the rear yard to the front yard, the reduced side yard setback results from the diagonal lot line extending between the front and rear lot lines. So that reduction is a result of the diagonal lot. We're not dealing with a rectangular property, number one. But even at 2 meters, it's our opinion that we can pass between the front and rear yards without any trespass issues, number one. Number two, certainly enough room to maintain or repair when and if that was needed on the east side of the garage or of the residential addition to the rear of the garage. And we'll also mention that the addition of the residential space, single story, the garage would be accommodating habitable space above, not for the purposes of a dwelling unit, but for extra residential space, which is permitted in the zoning bylaw. And as a result of that diagonal lot line, together with the curved nature of Neil's Drive, does result again in trying to keep a more perpendicular shaped home, sort of to result in what we see on the site plan without changing the siting of the garage to maintain the 3-meter setback and then building on an angle, so to speak, the owners have elected to design the addition in this way, resulting in, of course, the reduced side yard setback. I'd like to turn to the comments that we received as a result of circulation at this point of the meeting, Mr. Chair. So from the agencies, our commenting partners, we didn't receive any objections or concerns. From any of the partners who comment on our applications, the plans examiner from the building division did note that there's an outstanding building permit. And on follow-up, we determined that's for a detached garage in the rear yard. And so that's just pending a final inspection. So that's a follow-up matter for building division staff to undertake. We received a letter of concern from the adjacent property owner, Ann Byrne, at number 3 Niels Drive, who has resided there for 26 years. Those comments have been, in addition to photos that supplemented Ms. Byrne's comments, have been shared with the committee ahead of the meeting to include as part of your decision making. Concerns I'll summarize in Ms. Byrne's absence from the meeting. She wasn't able to participate electronically today, but had raised a couple of questions, and her comments are as follows. Number 1, why not build the addition facing Pigeon Creek Road? To that, we understand that access from the road is restricted and that that would not be permitted. There was concern that the space above the new garage was actually a 3rd dwelling unit, which we can confirm, clarify, it is not. It is associated with the dwelling space of the primary dwelling, and so this proposal is just for 1 additional dwelling unit, and that's to be sited behind the new garage. There additionally were concerns about the impact, in particular because of the floor plan in Ms. Byrne's home and the fact that her bedroom shares the nearest wall closest to the proposed addition, that the difference of that meter, 3.3 feet, would increase the level of noise, which could be disruptive to her both daily life and her ability to rest at night. With having the addition built 1 meter closer to the property line. And finally, that based on the sloping terrain between the homes, and I believe we can get an indication of that on this photo. I'm pointing now to the home on the left, Ms. Byrne's home at 3 Niels, the grade change in between, and now I'm ending at the truck that's parked in the driveway. There being concern over pooling water in this location and the possibility of destabilizing the hill as a result of the construction and how that may impact the integrity of Ms. Byrne's foundation. So we have followed up with Ms. Byrne on several pieces here. Which I've also clarified with the committee. I will conclude that as part of the building permit application process and review of the materials for the building permit, that a grading and drainage plan is required, and that the efforts that are put into that grading and drainage plan speak directly to how water is to be treated on the property. When there's an opportunity to improve stormwater runoff, that is done at that stage, but certainly there is a requirement to maintain the current levels of both quality and quantity of stormwater. So I, in my opinion, think that that is a matter that can be addressed through the building permit process. Mr. Chair, we provided those comments to the applicant and landowners as well, just so that they were aware of how their neighbor felt about the proposal. It is my understanding that the applicants are online, should the committee have any additional questions for them. But based on our evaluation and consideration of the comments we received, we are of the opinion that it is a reasonable and appropriate development, and the application should be approved.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the planner? Ms. Richardson?
Through you, what are the dimensions of the proposed ARU? It looks like it's a long, narrow structure.
Mr. Chair, through you to the member, if you'll just bear with me, I will pull out the application, just I don't have it at my fingertips. I want to be specific with that information. The report shows that same site plan that you see at Appendix C on the screen, with the exception of the 1.2 by 4.27 meter mudroom. The actual ARU addition would be a length of 18.29 meters, and of course the same width by 4.27 meters. If that's of help, if we visualize better in imperial, I can convert that to feet for you if you prefer. Okay, ask no further. All right, thank you. So that addition of the residential component outside of the mudroom would be about 14 feet wide by 60 feet deep.
So I'm just curious why they're going for this long, narrow addition and not making it more squared behind the garage.
Mr. Chair, through you, if we can just take a moment, I want to double check one component that supplements the site plan, and it's indicative of the location of the septic system, and that might be helpful to contribute to our discussion here. So please bear with me. Thank you. I appreciate the indulgence. The location of the septic system, which is quite extensive in the range, or at least what is proposed to be the bed for the new septic system to accommodate the 2 units, is quite extensive and is right within that, close to the rear of where the proposed garage would be. So the idea is to keep it within a safe buffer, required separation distance, safe buffer from the extent of the tile bed.
Follow up?
On Schedule C, it does indicate perhaps an extension of the driveway. Am I reading that correctly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, the driveway, as far as I understand, isn't proposed to be extended. It's indicating where the driveway, I look at that, I read that as a label from being on site, and also from the indications in the application that although there's a walkway that's proposed along the side of the addition, that they're the owners are making use of the existing driveway.
Anything further from the committee members? Ms. Robinson, go ahead. We can't hear you, Ms. Robinson.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
Thank you.
I share the concern of Sandra's about the length of this. I recognize that there's no zoning standard with respect to length, dwelling length. And a lot of jurisdictions have such standards, but there isn't one here. But I'm looking at the considerable length of this dwelling unit. And to me, it should be more square and not be so long. I think that the impact, the potential impact on privacy and visually.
Is there a question there?
I'm going to get to a question. Can I just preface my
Yes, go ahead.
concern and then ask the question? First of all, do we have elevations? So we know if there are windows along that 2-meter setback. I guess I'll start with that. Elevations, yeah, do we have that? That's a question for the planner, for Leah.
Yeah, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the member, an elevation was provided with the application, and it indicates a door and a window on the exterior wall. What we don't see is the exterior wall of the adjacent home, and I was pulling up the photo of the adjacent home just to see if we could determine if there was in fact any windows on that side of the home, and apologize, we don't see that in this photo. Go ahead.
Was there any consideration given to the potential visual impact on the neighboring property of having a building that long along their lot line? The 2 meters to 3 meters, it isn't so much that that's significant. It's the length of the structure being proposed that is that close. Visually, to me, there's an impact there. Was there consideration given to that?
Mr. Chair, through you, yes, there was consideration given to that.
Robinson, further?
I'll save my comments for later.
All right, thank you. Are there any further questions of the planner by committee members? Mr. Strangway.
Just following up on the last two comments, I share their concern. It appears that this ARU is maybe not as large as the existing house, but in square footage, it's getting up there. Is there anything that came to the attention of our planning staff with regard to the overall size of this being an ARU?
Ms. Barry?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through to the member, the coverage and the square footage falls within the threshold, so it's acceptable under those terms.
Follow up, Mr. Strangway?
I'll hold my comments as well, but I have some concerns. Thank you.
Anything further from committee? All right, is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hi, my name's Andrea Lalonde. I would just like, can I start my video? Is that working?
We can hear you, we can't see you.
I tried to start the video. I'm not really sure why it's not working.
All right, well, go ahead and speak, ma'am.
I would just like to say thanks to the planning staff and to Ms. Barry for the report. I agree with the report, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have to the best of my ability.
And thank you for that. Are there any questions of the applicant? Ms. Robinson, go ahead.
Did you consider a different floor plan that wasn't as long into the rear of your property? I recognize that there may have to be an adjustment to the septic system, but it looks to me like there's lots of room to accommodate an adjustment in exchange for getting an approval for this.
The septic designer had advised that we keep it within this range for what he needed to do the work he needed to do. That's for his setbacks. That's all that I'm aware of. That it couldn't be a more square unit based on that.
Ms. Robinson, anything further?
Not at this moment.
Further questions of the committee to the applicant? All right, being none, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? All right, committee. Mr. Marsh?
Chair, I'll move the application as presented.
And did I see a seconder from Councillor Yeo? All right. Do either of you wish to speak to it?
Just speaking to the variance itself, it conforms to the variance, and unfortunately, it's not this committee's position to decide on the style or layout. It conforms, it meets all the other zoning bylaws, and it meets the intent of the ARU. It's similar to what we dealt with last month. We're not here to, whether we agree with the ARU aspect of things, it does meet the 4 tests.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. Councillor Yeo?
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'd have to agree with Mr. Marsh. It certainly might not be what the neighbor wants to see, but it is perfectly legit project. Thank you.
Thank you. For questions, Mr. Strang?
I agree fully with Mr. Marsh and Councillor Yeo. It certainly meets the tests. There's no question about that, and I appreciate the fact that the applicant wishes to move ahead with this. I do feel some sympathy for the neighbor. I think if we were the next door neighbors, it wouldn't be in our interest to have a building that long going down the side lot, and I certainly do feel for them. It's unfortunate it can't be more rectangular, and these ARUs I continue to express some concern with. I think things that we would not have done in the past, we are now doing to permit them. Thank you.
Further comments? Ms. Robinson, go ahead.
So I disagree that it meets the tests. I don't think that the ARU, I have no issue with the ARU, but as designed, I do not believe that it's desirable for the appropriate development of the land. And I think that when you look at the other test with respect to impact, I think that it doesn't meet the test of not having an impact on the adjacent property. So to me, it fails significantly on those 2 tests. So I can't support the motion.
All right, thank you. Further comments or questions? All right, as chair, then I am going to support the motion. I think probably Mr. Marsh hit it right on the head with his comments that regardless of how we feel, and again, I hear what Mr. Strangway has to say, that, you know, with respect to supporting the neighbor, absolutely these things aren't necessarily pretty, and they may to some degree impact negatively, but it meets all the parameters with respect to the legislation. So we're not in a position to oppose because we feel that perhaps it doesn't look right, or you know, there's other things wrong. So I will support the motion. All right, are there any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. All right, we've got Ms. Richardson opposing and Ms. Robinson opposing.
Opposed.
What was that?
Opposed.
Yes, yeah, you got, you,
Yeah.
Ms. Robinson opposed and Ms. Richardson opposed, and the other 4 of us are in favor. So that motion carries. Thank you. Your application is approved.
Thank you very much.
All right, moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2022-057. This is 1023 Little Britain Road, Geographic Township of Mariposa. And again, we have a memorandum from Ms. Berry with respect to a deferral. Go ahead, Ms. Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an application, and as a result of notice of circulating the minor variance application, we received comment from Kawartha Region Conservation Authority that identified the flooding hazards are present on the property. The property is within the boundary of Sturgeon Lake Management Plan, and also a highly vulnerable aquifer. A permit through their agency is required prior to any on-site works being completed. That said, the garage has already been constructed. It was constructed in 2021, and because no permit was issued for its development, KRCA is pursuing violation action on this property. The owners are aware and are cooperating to address the non-compliance and are working with Conservation Authority staff to address the matters of non-compliance. It's our position that before we continue with evaluating the application, which seeks relief from rear and side yard setbacks, coverage, and height, that in order to come back and inform the committee with the results of the KRCA's investigation and be able to speak to that we ask the application return in similar fashion, perhaps not as noted in the, at the time, the request to the October meeting, but we will bring it to the very next possible meeting once we have comments back from KRCA. So I would request that we change the date to the last C of A meeting of the year or sooner as the results of the comment period come to us. So that would be, again, my only adjustment to our request for deferral. We have spoken to the owner, who's aware of our position and the reasons for it, and accepts that position today. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Ms. Berry. Are there any questions of the planner? Then in that case, I'm looking for a deferral motion to go back no later than the last meeting of the year. Mr. Marsh, you want to make that motion? Seconded by Councillor Yeo. The only debate is the time, and I think we've got that. So all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. All right, I think that concludes the agenda with respect to applications, and we're moving along here now. So now to other business. I would advise that I have discussed with Ms. Berry, as a result of her inquiry, with respect to upcoming dates for meetings. I agree with her suggestions, but of course, it'll be up to the committee to, but anyway, having said that, Ms. Berry, go ahead.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Chair. We took a look at the balance of the meetings for the year 2022. Can't believe we're talking about this already. We're not even into the fall yet. But in order to continue at sort of the pace that we are processing the applications to be addressed by Committee of Adjustments, sort of in looking back, reflecting on what we've accomplished together in the last 4 months, and to continue with this pace and the volume of applications moving through and completing the end of our backlog, we are suggesting that the September meeting, the October meeting, and the November scheduled meetings, there's 2 of them, tentatively that was approved by the committee at the beginning of the year, that we adjust those by a week. So instead of meeting September 15th, we request that we would meet the 22nd of September. October, instead of meeting on the 20th, we request that instead we meet the 27th. And finally, instead of having 2 meetings almost back-to-back in November, as has been sort of past practice, we're suggesting that in light of the time frame around the election and appointment of committee members, and in order to circulate an agenda with materials for the newly appointed committee members to review at least a week ahead of the meeting following the election, that we reschedule November's meetings to the last week of November, the week starting the 28th, and in fact, the date falls on December 1st. Mr. Chair, so those are our three suggestions going forward for, wait for it, the last three C of A meetings of 2022 that will bring us right up to date with the minor variance applications. This is a major milestone, and in large part thanks to you tolerating as large agendas as you have for the past 4 months, so thank you.
Comments, questions? Mr. Marsh?
Well, I was just gonna ask if you want a motion to, do we have to approve it by motion?
I think that's a good idea, that we have a motion, just that we support the rescheduling of dates as suggested by Ms. Berry.
Yep.
So you're making that motion? Do I have a seconder? Mr. Strang? Any further comments or questions? Yep.
Through you, I'm just curious, are we still meeting our guidelines for the number of meetings we must hold?
I didn't know there was one.
Mr. Chair, that's a good question. The, and I presume, if I can sort of follow up with a question to the member, the fact that traditionally we would hold 2 meetings in November in order to sort of forego a December meeting, we're still within our dutiful requirements here to, by having the meetings that we've already had, absent a meeting in December, we won't be in contravention of the terms of reference.
I was just trying to recall if our terms of reference indicated we shall have 12 meetings.
I will gladly double check that and come back to the committee with a firm position on that after we recheck the terms of reference. It's very specific language, and we'll make sure that we're not contravening it. I don't think that we are, but we'll double check.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Richardson. Councillor Yo, you had something? Did I see another hand somewhere? No? All right, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Anything further under other business from committee members?
I would just like to thank Ms. Berry for forwarding us all the information on the ARUs.
Let me say, Leah, you do an excellent job. That's the only word I can use to describe it. I don't know how the heck you visit and out on these properties, and then you're putting all this stuff together, and you're a Wonder Woman. Honest to God. So, well done, and we appreciate it. Anything further? Anything from staff? Nothing. All right. A motion to adjourn. Ms. Richardson, Mr. Strangway, all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you.